And today was, my day. Like, this is the action I look for today. Same kind of pattern. If you could scroll a little bit, Kyle. The first thing that I noticed was pretty much every single day, it would hold the previous day's high. So as you can see, the first run, the second day there after the big run, even though it looked weak into the close, we're still holding that previous high of the day. We gap up big, we go sideways, and the dips still holding the previous day high. So my entire plan for today was, it's okay to hit weakness, but it can't be above the previous high of the day. So if we gapped up 260, 270, I'm not going to be shorting that 250.
All right, everybody, welcome back to This Week in Steady Trade. We're filming this on the 21st of October. We're, 3/4 of the way through the month now. What are you guys seeing? How's your trading? And then also, just what do you think the market's doing out there?
This week, or this month has been pretty good. Like I mentioned last month, the fall months are pretty slow for, at least in my experience, the past 2 or 3 years. And so I was and if you keeping track of at least me and Jack's month, we had one of our lowest months in over a year. And so going into this month, I was like kind of guessing, are we going to be the same? Are we going to be better? Like, how's it going to look? And I'm actually quite satisfied with this month. Like, there's many more opportunities, not as crazy as like July or April or May, but still plenty steady of opportunities, plenty of great plays. And this month's looking to be another great month. So I'm super excited about it.
Hell yeah. Jack Room?
Yeah, I would agree with Kyle. Definitely September was really rough, if you guys have watched any of the last episodes. But this month's been good, and really it's just been me focusing back on my niche, these OTC multi-day runners. Last episode, before the one with Dom, I was talking a lot about LKNCY, and kind of the new one has been NWBO, which was a big trade for me today. And last week, actually, it was good trading too. I was just kind of, as I was mentioning, just taking singles and singles and singles. And then when the big trade came, then sized up on it. I was very familiar with it. So we'll see what the rest of the month's going to bring, but pretty satisfied already with the month. Just going to kind of take it easy for the rest of the month unless another A-plus opportunity sets up.
It's awesome. Yeah, I agree. I mean, OTCs have been running, which is awesome. But also, I think the overall market's kind of heating back up. It's not June, but today I had 3 or 4 price alerts go off on stocks that I set 6 months ago because stuff's just starting to spike again. We've had some wild runs. What was the one that ran yesterday? W something? WEI.
Oh yeah.
Halted. That was
big runner.
But yeah, it's just nice to see just consistent runners again. There's no dry periods. I feel every day kind of have some set plays. I'm not just walking into the day to see what's moving, which I like to see. So
Totally.
yeah, in terms of profits for me, it's not bad by any means. It's just, low to average. I'm not trading much this week or next week. Got a bunch of life stuff going on, moving. So we know what happened to Jack when he moved. So therefore, I probably am not trading very much next week. But yeah, that's cool. That's the good part of trading. You can just take some days off. Huddy's been off, I don't know, since July.
Yeah. Who's Huddy? I forgot.
Exactly.
He's surfing waves, bro.
Precisely. All right. Well, Kyle, you want to fire these charts up, sir?
Let's get them started.
So let's start with GME. This one, it's GameStop. I'm sure everyone's basically heard of GameStop. Kind of failing business. I don't really know. They're not bankrupt, but just all retail stores are having a rough time. So yeah, if we look at the 3-year, they were dwindling for a long time. And then it started squeezing. And this really first came on my radar because of Bohen. Bohen talks about this stock all the time because he thinks when esports are coming, because they're just gaining momentum and getting popular, he thinks GameStop's going to be making some big moves because it's their do or die moment. If they don't adapt to esports, they're basically going to go out of business. So back in September when it was spiking, that's kind of when I just kind of been on my watch list since then. haven't really been trading it. But then when it started consolidating near the highs between like $9 and $10 or whatever, here we go. Yeah, so when it spiked really big one day on some super fluffy news. If you actually read into it, like they put Microsoft in the headline, but it wasn't like a partnership with Microsoft. It was some classic penny stock stuff like we're using Microsoft tablets or whatever. So really sketchy, but like there's like 90% of the float is short. So like there's a lot of short sellers in that. So when there's a catchy headline, it started ripping. I traded it a little bit into that day, but ended up selling most of it around like $12. So I didn't really catch a huge part of that move. But if you look, that's like exactly what I look for on a daily basis. Those series of higher lows, grinding up through highs, and then broke highs and continued on, like beautiful. Anyways, so then if we go zoom out a little bit, I still was just on my watch list, and it started holding up. And then on the 12th, 13th, 14th, like those days, it started again on like a daily chart, forming some higher lows. It looked like it was grinding up. And again, in the back of my head, I knew like a large portion of the float was short. So like they didn't like get an exit from that news article. And the fact that it was able to hold up, 5 days after that news, even though it was kind of fluffy, I was like, all right, like this is kind of setting up for a breakout. So the same pattern I looked for intradaily was kind of happening here on the daily. So I started sizing in there on the 14th. Started risking just the previous day's low, which was like, like 1170s. And then thought I was like sizing good. And then the market got down a little bit. So like I was sweating a little bit the next morning because I started having some larger size, but it just randomly got down. There wasn't news or anything. So we had a very quick spike out of the gate, which made me comfortable. And then I was up pretty substantial in my position. In hindsight, I probably should have sold some into that spike just to, not the full position, but a little bit to lock some in because I was expecting a pullback. And then when the pullback came, I sized in. I think at the peak, I had like 8,000 or 9,000 shares, but my average was like sub 1250. So after that double bottom, my thesis at this point was if it breaks below 1250, that double bottom area, like I'm just gonna cut it and basically break even though like I have 9,000 shares. Like it's pretty monster size, but when it sets up was the series of higher lows. Like that's where I make, most of my big trades come from that because I'm able to get really large size without risking a ton of money. And then it started spiking. And yeah, basically I sold in the spike, it was good, but minimized the gains a lot because I started being like, wow, dude, I have 9,000 shares. I'm up $1 a share. And like I started thinking about the P&L. So then I started shaving it off into the spikes, locked in like I think 8.5K overall on it. And yeah, the thesis continued to play out and like it got above 15 and that would have been my biggest trade ever. But I can't really complain. Locked in great money, it worked. And still going forward, like this is still on my radar because again, like it's just holding near highs. Like look at that. Like one of these days it's gonna perk up. I think it's gonna perk up. I'm waiting for the day and then just continue on and hopefully spike, 18, 20 area. Because all these short sellers that are in it are still just trapped. So watching it closely going forward. Ideally, we can get some news and really crank this up. But that was my best play of the month so far. And hopefully we get another one before the month's over.
It's a good trade.
Thank you.
Makes me want to buy the next break. Not nearly as good. I'll find a way to butcher it. But yeah, it looks good. Awesome.
Gotta buy those higher lows, bro.
Damn straight. It's all about the higher lows.
Awesome. So on Monday, I had a really good trade on a listed play in quite a long time. Normally me and Jack are very good at OTCs, even Matt as well. And we haven't had, we've had a lot of NASDAQ runners like WEI yesterday, but a lot of them either gap down too big, and if you watch the episodes, I don't like those, or just, runners that go one and done, end up fading all day. And like, that's not my strategy. That's not what I do. And so I miss a lot of these listed runners, but NNDM was finally one that had a multi-leader run in it. I'm super excited for it. So then coming in on Monday, I was worried we were going to gap down so much by how much it sold off on Friday. Given that it ran so well in the morning on Friday around here, I was thinking, great, like if this can close like above 550, maybe even close to 6, there's going to be a bunch of downside on the first red day and it's going to be great. And then when we decide to fade off like this and then fade all the way into the close and close sub 5, I'm getting pretty disappointed, where I'm thinking, man, is this thing even gonna, like, so much selling happened on Friday. I was like, man, is there really some selling left? And it's like, yeah, if you look at the daily chart, this thing's still up from, 250. So it's still up 100%. So plenty of downside. And all I needed was a gap up, right? I love the gap up plays. And that's exactly what we did. So I was very, very happy about that. Didn't short any pre-market until I saw this crack, and I thought to myself, okay, this is much weaker than I anticipated. This gap up clearly there's no justification for this gap up, hence why we're starting to sell off before the market even opens. And into this bounce, I started in very small size, out the open, couldn't even morning spike. I believe VWAP was like already in the mid 5, so the entire day it stayed above VWAP. And then I sized into a couple of these bounces. At this point, I'm now risking like 530 or 540. I don't think after 2 attempts morning spike, it just shouldn't show any more strength, right? It should probably go red and be your first red day, especially after, all this resistance now from the selling on Friday. And so that's exactly what ended up happening. Made a new low, one last bounce, one last, final attempt to any recovery whatsoever, and then totally died. I believe I covered a little bit into these dips, and then finally most of it into the last pull to the 450s. And then looking at the daily chart, looking at the daily chart at 450, I thought it was done. Like, I thought, like, okay, it probably doesn't go much lower. But at 450, I mean, we're not that oversold, right? Like I said, we're up from like 250, and the first red day was only going to go to 450. So I thought there's probably more downside in it. And I wanted to be a part of it. And so once we bounced back to, what level was it here? This level here at 480, I decided, fine, screw it. Like, I do want to get reshort at this level, risking red green, which I believe was like close to $5 for 490. And then we faded nicely, and then it made a new low below 440, now into the 430s. I covered it all down here, and then that was it. I made like 3K on this trade. The downside, not the downside, but the biggest mistake, I guess, not mistake, but just, I guess, unfortunate, was that how well it sold off the next day as well. I wasn't even watching it this day. This would have been a really nice spike to get short into, and then have it fade even lower, down to the 3. So that was really cool. But just shows you how an overextended multi-day runner that has a lot of range to the downside can really go back down there. There's a lot of great downside for runners like this. So really good trade and good lesson overall.
Oh yeah.
Great.
Fire. All right, Jack.
Ready to do Jack? I'm gonna go daily.
Warm me up a daily.
This candle just is so convenient.
So first things first, ignore the candle on the right. That's just a misprint. The main trade today was the first red day. If you can zoom in a little bit there, Kyle, so people can see. Yeah. So basically, this is an OTC runner that first popped up over 40 cents back in the beginning of September. And it was very CYDY-like, where it had a very large market cap, and the daily just created a really nice kind of bull flag, you could say, in a sense. And you really don't see that consistent volume in OTC, where it's trading 5 million plus shares a day, 15 million shares. And then we got what we were looking for. We got that breakout above $1, and I was longing it pretty much every single day of last week. And I ended up locking in like 15, maybe like 15K on it just last week, buying the breakouts, holding it overnight when it's closing strong. And then the last couple of days, I started getting short bias on it, because now we're extended from $1. We're up near $2. It hasn't gone green to red yet. There hasn't been that first red day. So I start stalking it yesterday and today. Yesterday, I was a little bit early and I made some mistakes. It was really poorly executed trade, but I only ended up losing a couple grand yesterday. So yesterday, very hard dip out of the open, which got me interested in the short. So I started piling into that morning weakness, thinking that, okay, we're going to go red. We're going to panic into the ones. And the dip caught. And unfortunately for me, I kind of just hesitated. I was like, all right, I'm going to see how this bounce does. And I did not cut when it started to grind up. So it started to grind up. And then once it went above high day, I was like, all right, I'm just going to wait for a dip to get out. didn't give me a dip to get out. So I ended up just covering in the high 220s, somewhere in that range. And it was just super frustrating because the price action was just like really toxic. Like it just went straight off low a day. As you can see, no dips whatsoever, all the way from low a day to the high of the day. Like it would dip 2 or 3 cents. And basically then I got reshort, really decent size up at 249, which was pretty much the high of the day. It was like 20,000 shares, and the high of the day was 251, and it ended up just chopping around in the 240s. And I was just so frustrated because the stock was not dipping. And I ended up covering and made a little bit of my money back from the morning short, but basically just got very frustrated. And then I walked away, and I come back to my screens and it's at like 220, and it's just so frustrating. So unfortunately for me, I chased back in down with a very bad average around like 210. And then once it bounces and it creates that higher low above the previous close, I was like, I really just got to step away from this thing. Like I'm not trading it very well at all. Then it ended up bouncing and squeezing out. And then into the close there, I did short that key support breakdown of 230, which was probably my best trade on the day of it, where I shorted that 230 break. And I had that clear risk level of 237, where it really consolidated and proved that that was a key resistance level. And it didn't feel like too big of a chase to me or a bad entry at all. So we ended up just fading off a little bit, but it didn't really fade off too much. I ended up just covering into those perks there, and I got out for a small gain. Ended up losing a couple grand on it overall yesterday, but it was still nothing compared to the 15K that I made on it the previous week going long. And today was, my day. Like this is the action I look for today. Same kind of pattern. If you could scroll a little bit, Kyle. The first thing that I noticed was pretty much every single day, it would hold the previous day's high. So as you can see, the first run, the second day there after the big run, even though it looked weak into the close, we're still holding that previous high of the day. We gap up big, we go sideways, and the dips still holding the previous day high. So my entire plan for today was it's okay to hit weakness, but it can't be above the previous high of the day. So if we gapped up 260, 270, I'm not going to be shorting that 250. But once we get that weak gap up, I started dabbling into that 240 level. And as we keep failing, I'm increasing my size as we're gearing up for that red to green move. And I ended up getting 23,000 shares short from 237, which was going to then be risked off 250. And I knew this wasn't going to be a massive panic move because, one, it panicked huge yesterday, and just the history of the stock made it so that this stock doesn't really like panic just right when it goes green to red. I didn't expect for it to just wash like 50%. So for me, it was key to have that hard risk level where I just didn't want to get emotionally in and out. And we ended up failing. And then we did end up washing, and the panic was actually quite nice. I started covering my shares right into that $2 support from the previous day, just started nibbling a few shares off. And then down there in the mid 180s, I ended up locking it all in. And it was a nice 9.5K profit. And then I started playing the dips, bought the dips after it made that new low. And I ended up just, selling into strength, selling into walls of sellers, reloading dips when I would look weak, and ended up locking in like $6,000 on the long. Was really happy with the execution there. One main thing that I will note was it wasn't like a straight up panic. It was kind of grinding down. So one thing I looked for was that volume to start drying up, because then that's usually when the bounce comes in. There's less sellers. As you can see on that first bounce attempt, there's still massive volume. But after that second bounce attempt, the volume started to thin out just a little bit. And I was more comfortable adding into dips and selling into pops. And I ended up selling the last of my shares right into the $2. And then immediately I'm thinking, all right, bounce short after we made that huge spike through VWAP. And I ended up just shorting into the 210s, 220s. I don't think it hit 220, but like 210 to 220-ish. Got a 215 average and used less size, like 10 to 15,000 shares, covered into the dips, re-added a little bit into the pop, and then ended up getting very frustrated at the end of the day because right into that perk there at 2, I started covering my shares. It's not the end of the world. It's only 15 cents, but it ended up just getting me right there. And then to see it just crash down a little bit more was a little frustrating, but it's not the end of the world. Still satisfied with how I trade it. Could have done a little bit better here and there, but overall made like 18 grand on it today, long and short. So pretty happy with it. We'll be watching it for further fade moving forward. Still is extended pretty decently off that $1. So we'll see what it offers.
Yep, love it.
Boom.
I love this. I originally hated this ticker because of how it moved, but after the last few days, I finally got a grip, or really the last week, I finally got a grip of understanding it. And once I did, then it finally like clicked for me. Where, for example, the first 2 breakouts, when it runs from 30 cents up to 60 cents, I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a great short. I'll have 100%, like multi-day run, awesome. And then I can't pull up the intraday of these days, but they're just very choppy, very slow moving. Price action is very weird. So I took a lot of losses in these days, and I never took them long. I think I maybe took it long this day and made a few $100, but like didn't even long it at the breakout level, and then tried shorting it some more. And it's like, it was just a pain in the butt. And then finally I missed it again, go over the $1 breakout. And so when we held $1 and then start breaking out on this day over 120, over this previous red day high, I finally was like, screw it, Kyle, like go long, because this is such a terrible short for me in the past. Like it's because it just goes up so steadily and strongly. So that's when I actually started longing it in these dips here for the 120 breakout. And then I think I sold into like the 140s here. And I think Jack played it similarly that day. So that was a really good trade on my part. And then, good long profit for me. I think I made like close to 1,500. And then I swung it overnight and made another 1,500 on this day. So I was really happy about that. And then in terms of the short, same thing as Jack. I unfortunately got caught in this weakness as well. It just looked, the weakest pull it had on any of the mornings necessarily. I mean, this one was okay, but the gap was so big. So this didn't really, get me short biased, because it was like, it's had so much way to go that I wasn't really interested. But because the red green was so close this day, I definitely got anxious. So I started getting short, and then it bounced, and I quickly cut it. I was like, this is not what I want at all. Avoided it. Unfortunately, didn't avoid it. Missed this move. I was not short for this, unfortunately. But then also, did reshort this bounce. But luckily, I avoided this squeeze, because I would have taken a loss on this. But luckily, I think my average was like 225. And once we were starting to make a bunch of higher lows here, I quickly cut, because I was like, no, this is not what I want, and I don't want to swing this if it's green on the day. And then of course we squeeze, so that was great. And then in terms of the shorts, very similar to how Jack does it, because it's just your typical great first red day pattern. Same idea, shorting. The great I didn't really notice that, but the great analysis that Jack made was over the previous day high, and so that was a really good turning point for the stock. And so once it goes red, the rest is history. It holds green or holds red in the day. Panics, didn't really make any on the dip buy. I really screwed that one up. But yeah, great analysis by Jack, and great trade overall for sure.
Agreed.
The last trade I want to go over is a little bit different of a play, which is JKS, which is not, by no means a penny stock or small cap, but it does just fit the similar pattern of, what we do trade, which is like psychology, mania, kind of overhype, overbought stocks. And I mean, this stock has gone on like a 30-day run from, 20s now. It went to touch 90 today, which is just wild to think about. And I was watching it for a short. Now, I did short it a couple times in these few red days here. But each time I got out for like a small gain or small loss, it didn't really affect me either way. And then I let it go. I was like, no, this is too grindy. It's too choppy. The only way I short this is if it and goes to like $100. And the fact that, when it closed yesterday at 85, I was like, holy crap, like we might get there today. And so I did want to keep it on watch. And out the open, we actually pulled pretty decently here. And I got short into this bounce, quickly went back green. So I cut it. I was like, okay, it's going to keep doing what it always does. But then we pulled this pull right here was pretty much the A-okay, like reshort Kyle, because this thing is going to pull very, very hard. I reshorted into one of these perks here around 83. And then unfortunately into these bounces kind of made me really unanxious. It is under a VWAP, which looking back was pretty obvious in hindsight, and I should have just stayed short. But I ended up covering because I thought these bounces were going to lead to another squeeze, like it always has. Like, the past 90 or not 90 days, the past like 30 days, it's always had, like this day, this last red day, it has these like very quick spike ups, and then before you know it, it really squeezes back and you're taking a loss. So when I saw these bounces, I kind of got very cold feet and I just covered and I said, screw it. Like, I don't want to deal with it. And then what do you know, after one last bounce attempt and we just fade $10 more a share. So left about $1,000 or $2,000 on the table, but the money doesn't really matter. It's more the execution for me and the fact that I had a great trade plan. Like, my idea was that this thing was going to pull to $70 and it did exactly that into the close. It's more so that I had a perfect thesis and I just didn't have conviction to hold through it. So it happens, and it's a good learning experience, and I'll be ready for the next big runner like this. That's a higher price stock and moves a little bit more differently than a small cap. So
awesome. All right, everyone, that's all we got for this week in Steady Trade. If you're new, like, subscribe, leave a comment. We love the support, and we will be doing this again next week. But yeah, that's all we got. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Later.